Okay, looking at the general directions for the final, we can see here important date 5/23. That's 1:30 to 4, so we have a little bit longer to do that than a normal class period. You may not need it. It's really not any longer of a test, really not any different than the midterm in terms of its general structure and what it's demanding of you and so on. So really it's a final exam in the sense of being last. It's not like a big cumulative final. It's not cumulative. It's, as we should know now, just second half material and just from the study guide and so on. So just a second major exam, not cumulative. It is in class, so make sure, just like last time, that you've got the Scantron and also a green book. And just like last time, I'll give you the full range of selections from the essay topics to choose from in class when you're taking the exam. I'll print for you that full range of essay topics. So um, that'll be just like that. And 25 questions taken from the study guides on Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. There will be quite a bit of overlap from the quizzes. That's intentional. So if you kind of like diligently work your way through that material, then you should be able to provide yourself a nice knowledge base to meet these multiple choice questions. So that's going to be on your Scantron. And just to give you a little sense of kind of why I do it like I do here, I see the essay portion of this as a kind of demonstration of depth of knowledge, kind of focused, in-depth, analytical, comparative, and I guess creative, insightful, etc. Explanations, discussions, and presentation of kind of long form ideas. And that's a kind of focused um, demonstration of knowledge there, of depth, as we would say. And so for the Scantron, that's, excuse me, that's really just testing your breadth of knowledge. So I want to see that you kind of have like, I don't want to say bullet point, but you kind of got like key info points for enough of the breadth of the material that we've covered since the midterm, that I can say, yeah, you've got like a general knowledge base of the monotheistic Abrahamic traditions, because, well, we'll put out these as a test of that. So that's just a little kind of explanation of how I approach making final exams from the standpoint of, what kind of learning outcomes, I guess, to use that phrase, kind of really assessing and how these different parts of the exam address different kinds of learning and learning outcomes. I don't usually like to use the term learning outcomes. I like the term learning for sure. So more importantly there. Okay, so just going on about that a little bit. So there will be 50 points total for each of the multiple choice and essay topics, coming to a total of 100. And again, the essay itself, it'll be like 4 to 5 sides in length. So that's an approximation. That would constitute 2 to 2.5 full pages of large green book paper. That's the same as 4 to 5 sides. So that's the calculation there. So what's important is that you're giving some kind of in-depth treatment of something, whatever your topic is. But it's an in-depth presentation. That's not a bullet point. It's not a blurb. So should take that seriously. And I'm assuming that you're coming in there with pretty considerable forethought about what you're writing, and kind of expecting, like, the prepared student isn't showing up and kind of doing this spur of the moment. So come in with like good prepared thoughts. And I'll say this, this is pretty important. I'll emphasize the detailed version of this general point and some of the other uh, individual topics I'm going to discuss later. So what's really important, you kind of at the end of the day, for me to see, looking at your essay answers, is you, to kind of put it simply, and how to show up, how you can show up in your essay answer is something that I think is good to discuss. It's not easy to discuss because there's not like a simple formula that I would boil that down to. And in large part, that's out of respect for what that process is. So, as you'll see in most of the questions, there's some kind of like comparative analysis that I'm asking you to do that always involves making a case for something. That might be a case for a moral issue. It might be a case of interpretation, how to properly interpret various of the religious principles that we're looking at. It might be an argument favoring one aspect of one of the religions over one aspect of the other religions that we've looked at that's not, and this is, I think, important, asking for your overall favoritism in a way or support for either of the religions. And this is important that it's really just with respect to some specific aspect that you're comparing them in regards to. And that's important because that's really what I want to see you doing is out of this huge thing that's a religion and another huge thing that's another religion, you can kind of locate a very clear locus of analysis or kind of line of analysis within which to engage in a clear, focused discussion. And within that, you can have an analytical approach that's giving interpretations that are informed by the broader religions that this close analysis is part of, but you're able to kind of create a thread of continuity of some sort through this kind of thickets that are religions, so these huge things. So that's really what is a kind of a primary way of succeeding in doing any of these essays, is that you're able to show up in that particular way, because that requires being informed by the course material. That's kind of broad. It's kind of the thickets. Like, and that's one way of showing up that I can see your discussion all the way through is informed by our class readings. And I can also see that there's a specific line of discussion, continuity, a thesis, an argument, can be many different forms, different ways in which you are creating that narrow focused discussion within that very broad set of ideas. So I think that's, that's very broad, but to be honest, that's one of the most important things that I look at aside from the obvious stuff, like being able to get the right descriptions of things, the right explanations, and just kind of being factually correct, where for our purposes, that's really just given as the default account in our Young textbook. And we can also include Karen Armstrong. So aside from that, which is kind of like obvious of what you look for as a grader, what I do look for is you showing up in that kind of way. So when you're writing, try to show me that you're doing both, that you're bringing an informed, broad knowledge from the course readings to this narrow discussion that you are, well, I want to put this, this narrow discussion that you're defining and running, running the show on this. So showing up in that way. Okay, so that's kind of one way that I'm trying to be helpful in giving you an understanding of kind of the general perspective as a writer for these essay topics that reflect what I'm looking for as a grader on, let's say, educational grounds. Those are kind of my educational grounds for evaluating the essays in general. All right, cool. So I didn't actually plan to go on that quite as long, but I think that's useful. All righty.